as hard as it was to connect with my belly and my body and my baby, for fear of if I get too close to him, it'll just be so much harder. There was definitely a fear that if I connected with him, I would miss him more. And I think that was part of the survival mode, which it doesn't matter. You have already connected with them. Once you know that it's a wanted pregnancy and you want to bring this child into the world, you've already connected. You already love them. Before we dive into this episode, I want to give you a heads up that we will be talking about some deeply personal and sensitive topics, including miscarriage, infant loss, pregnancy termination, depression, and anxiety. These are heavy subjects, and it's okay if you are not in a place where you are ready to hear them right now. Your well-being is so important, and if this feels like too much for you today, maybe it's not the right time to listen. Please take care of yourself and come back when you feel ready. Welcome back to It's Getting Mom in Here. I'm your host, Kori, and I am so happy that you are here. If this is your first time stumbling across this podcast, I would highly recommend that you pause this episode and head back to episode 1. This is a story that I'm telling in sequential order, and it will make so much more sense if you start from the first episode. I have one announcement that I would like to make before we get into the show, and that is we are nearing the end of this story. There's just going to be a few more episodes to conclude this first season. After I finish telling the story, I really want to open up to some questions with a couple bonus episodes. I would love for you to reach out with your questions. I have created an anonymous question box on my website that you can put your questions in. Nothing is off limits from this whole story. I want your curiosities to run wild and just let me know what questions you have about this journey. To ask a question, you can go to itsgettingmominhere.com/about the show. These questions can also be directed to my husband. I'm going to be bringing him onto the show to talk a little bit about his side of this journey. So if you have questions for Taylor, please feel free to leave them there. Okay, and that is it for announcements. So we can jump right back into things where we left off from the last episode. There was one correction that I wanted to make. My MFM had told us that he was on call again and able to deliver the baby. I had said 10 days, it's 7 days. So he is on a 10-day rotation, but he would be back in the delivery rooms in 7 days. So from that time that we met with him on a Friday, he would be working again the following Friday. So we had 1 week to finalize this decision and do anything we wanted to do while I was still pregnant. That is just a point of clarification. That is where we are at in the story, is that last week. There was this amount of heaviness that came from that, this realization of this is my last week pregnant with this baby, and the end point is not something I'm excited for. I think it would feel very different in this pregnancy if it was week 40 and my induction date is set for a week from then. It's, your last week pregnant, but this excitement of wanting to meet the baby on the other side. I was very scared for that moment. In talking to the MFM, one thing that I didn't really bring up is there are a couple ways that you can end a pregnancy. In that conversation with him, we discussed those different ways. I didn't bring it up in that episode, but I'll bring it up now. You kind of have two options when you're in your second trimester, at least for the area that I live in. We were given the option to either have a medical induction or a surgical induction. In the moments that we were discussing ending the pregnancy, I definitely had these feelings of, I don't want to do any work. I don't want to even be present for this. Just get this baby out of me so that I can move forward and get past this horrendous grief. There's just this part of you that wants to just snap your fingers or click your heels like Dorothy and just be like, I don't want to be here anymore. However, when the MFM discussed the two options we had, I could really quickly feel what was going to be the right decision for me. So the first choice that he offered is a surgical option that is closer to like a DNC type procedure where they would surgically go in and remove the baby. Given some of the details of how they would need to do that at this gestation, it just didn't feel right for me. I know some people who that absolutely felt right for them. like a lot of the other things that I've discussed on this podcast, I think it is an incredibly personal choice, and it's not a choice that anyone wants to make. You basically have a bad choice and an even worse choice put in front of you, and you're trying to figure out which one sucks the least for you. I went into this thinking like, there is no way that I am going to go through labor. That seems like a cruel torture to put somebody through when they know they're going to lose their baby. After he described the surgical option, though, it was like, all right, doc, what's the other option? And he said inducing labor, and you would ideally push the baby out. And at the size that the baby was, there wouldn't likely be a need for it to go to a C-section type delivery. So it ultimately would be a vaginal birth. As soon as he gave those two options, my thoughts changed. And it was, this is a baby that I love so much, and I want to pick an option that brings them into the world with what I felt was the most respect and decency. I want to be so, so clear that to anyone in this position who picks the other option, they are thinking about their own really personal reasons out of love and respect for the baby, themselves, their body, so many things. And I just want to be so, so clear, because it's such a sensitive topic, that this was just where my headspace was at. This is where I was thinking, this is what I was feeling in those moments. And I don't want it to come off at all like the other option is bad or negative. It's just where my head was at. Honestly, that goes for all of the things that I've been talking about. I've been really open so far about early first trimester screening tests and if we would terminate a pregnancy based on different chromosomal issues. And everyone has been so kind to me in their responses to that. But I just really want to hit home that I would never want somebody to feel like I'm sitting here saying what's right and what's wrong. I just really, as much as I can put out there, these are all such personal choices, and not many people openly share their thought process for that. And I think that it's something worth talking about. I think that it's so personal, but even with our closest friends, we might not have these conversations. So my hope is that perhaps this just starts a conversation with you internally, you and your partner, you and your mom, you and your friend, whatever it is. These are things that it's okay to talk about, and it's okay for all of us to have a different decision that feels right for us. Okay. Let's snap back to the story here. So that being said, in that conversation with the MFM, I felt best that it would be a medically induced delivery. Going forward a little bit here, we have this last week with the baby, and it felt like the pressure was on. That it's like, what's your bucket list for you and this baby? Because at this point in time, how I was viewing where I was at in my pregnancy is that I was carrying my baby, and these were the last moments that I would have together with my child while they were still alive. I really wanted to do as much as I could to talk to them, play music for them, all those different things. Now, you may have noticed throughout the podcast, I have been referring to the baby as them, they, it. The baby, all these very gender neutral terms. If you have been following my journey, you already know what the sex of the baby was. But if you have not been following me, then it's going to be a surprise, and it's coming at you right now. We did not want to know the sex of the baby until the baby was born. I had always said, I want that Lion King moment where the doctor or your midwife or whoever delivering the baby lifts them up and holds the baby in front of you and says, it's I wanted this grandiose moment. When we found out we were going to lose this baby, I felt it really important to me to know exactly who it was. My husband and I had picked out some different names that we were thinking, if it was a boy, if it was a girl. And in that last week, I just wanted to know who this child was. And we didn't want to share with anyone else. We just wanted to know for us. And part of me also wanted that because we weren't positive on the names. We were pretty sure with the boy's name. We weren't as sure with the girl's name. And I said, I just don't want to feel like there's any rush for us to pick a name because we're giving birth at 22 weeks. And that's not, I thought I had another 20 weeks to figure out this child's name. So I called up my midwife, who all along this way, she has been so incredibly involved with all of these conversations and made herself available to me in a way that I had just never experienced with a healthcare professional. And it was really wonderful to just have this connection outside of the hospital setting, where it was like, if I just needed to talk to someone, if I needed to touch base with someone, if I had questions about anything, I knew that she was my person. I called her with Taylor there with me. We put her on speaker and I said, I would like to know the sex of the baby. And I can hear she's driving. I'm pretty sure she was like driving with her family, and she's just so lovely to have taken this phone call. And I know, and I know also that she is listening to these podcasts. So I'm really going to say just all the nice things because I want her to hear them over and over again. I want it well documented how amazing she was for us in this journey. We're on the phone with her. We say, we want to know the sex of the baby. She says, are you sure? I was like, yes, we are sure. We want to know. I can tell you're driving if you need to wait until you're at the office, with the paperwork to look it up. And she goes, oh no, I know what you're having. I know. And it's like you could tell she was just so excited to like be this like secret holder, the secret keeper, that it's like, oh yeah, I fully know what you're having. And just my lips are sealed until you tell me. And so we're like, okay, let's hear it. And she says, you're having a boy. And honestly, I have chills and I'm emotional right now thinking about that moment, thinking about the couch that we were sitting on. And it was just, we're having a boy. We are having a boy. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful in that moment to hear that and know who he was and be able to talk to him and give him a name. This is the first part now for me that I'm tearing up telling this story. It was a really special moment. It was a really, really special moment. And I think it really helped personify him for us in those moments and really recognize that although he was teeny tiny, he was there, he was our son, he was growing in there with me. I think that really opened us up to how the rest of that week unfolded. We did a few different things. Through my work, I actually had been given an at-home Doppler. So the little instrument that you can use to listen to the baby's heart. I was like addicted to just listening to his little heart as much as I could and just really feeling that life inside of me. We had a really special moment. So with Taylor's family, we attached the Doppler to a Bluetooth speaker, and we have this cute little photo of me with my belly out, jelly all over it. We're listening to the heart. His parents were there at the house with us, and we had his brother and my sister-in-law on FaceTime, like a video call. Everyone was listening, and it was so beautiful just sitting in our living room. Everyone had written a little poem for this baby or a little letter that they read. And it just was so special to just allow anyone else to connect with our baby in those moments. And knowing that he was at a gestation where he could hear you. He was listening. He was there, and he got to hear his Graham's voice and he got to hear his papa's voice. It was really special. And my brother-in-law is incredibly talented with poetry and writing these really sweet limerick poems. And our son got to hear that. And it's those moments are there's something that I really cherish. We did something very similar with my family and allowed anyone who wanted to hear to just have a moment listening to the baby's heartbeat. And then for the most part, that week, we really kept things just simple and just quiet. We had hoped to do a maternity photo shoot, but with being only about halfway through the pregnancy, we weren't thinking that we were going to do that anytime soon. And I really went back and forth about what I would want. And we decided to take a couple photos just with my own camera. We set up a day bed in the living room where there was some good light, and we took a bunch of photos of my belly, me holding my belly, Taylor with me, and just these really, really special photos. And I'm so glad that we decided to do that, to capture those moments. I found for me, it was really special anytime that I was having a bath or a shower. And I don't know if there's any other parents out there who in their pregnancy have found this, that there's just some sort of connection that you have in those moments. I don't know if it's just the quiet, the peacefulness, but it was just a moment for me to just sit or stand with my belly and just be calm. I think we all know that it feels good to cry in the shower. Maybe we don't all know, but it's just like a nice feeling to cry in the shower, and just like the water runs down your face, the tears are coming, it doesn't feel as awful. Anyways, the shower and the bath were really valuable. We're a really calming space for me in those moments. As hard as it was to connect with my belly and my body and my baby, for fear of if I get too close to him, it'll just be so much harder. There was definitely a fear that if I connected with him, I would miss him more. And I think that was part of the survival mode, which it doesn't matter. You have already connected with them. Once you know that it's a wanted pregnancy and you want to bring this child into the world, you've already connected. You already love them. So in the shower, I would sing. I would pick a little nursery rhyme song, whatever, sing to him, rub my belly, and just really wanted him to feel calm. I know that there's different research that says that the baby can sense what the mother's feeling. And I tried so hard just to be calm for him and make these last few days good for him, special for him. I found that I would just let my music play also when I was in the shower or in the bath. And I happened upon this song. So it's by the Trues, they're a Canadian band, and Serena Ryder, and it's called In the Morning. Kind of one of the main lines in the chorus is that the sun will come up in the morning. And that really connected to me. And I played that song so much with this baby. And it really just felt like we were in such a dark, dark place in our lives. But I knew the sun would come up. The sun would rise again. We would not be living in this dark forever. I was just trying to just have those moments with him. So in addition to having these really sentimental moments, it was also quite busy in that last week with different appointments at the hospital. We opted to have an amniocentesis done. For those of you who aren't familiar, essentially they put a very large, very long needle into your belly that goes all the way through to your uterus. They draw back some of the amniotic fluid that surrounds the baby, and they use that to look for different abnormalities, different chromosomal issues. This would help be a bit more of a definitive test to try and figure out, why did this happen? Because at this point, the only thing that we knew was that my husband having a heart defect increased the chances slightly, but we wanted to essentially leave no stone unturned as far as diagnostic testing goes. We went in, I think that day we actually had to meet with a few different people. The team at the hospital that worked alongside our MFM, they were just so kind to us in these moments. Everyone knew the situation, which was really great that we weren't ever walking into a room of somebody who is putting out the wrong vibe for what we were going through. Because honestly, it was already hard enough just being in the women's health department, being in the obstetrical departments, because everyone there was pregnant. You just are sitting there assuming everyone else is having a healthy baby. Nobody else is dealing with the problems that we're dealing with. And thankfully, I feel like those departments know that, and we got ushered into private rooms pretty quickly. So this was a busy day. I think this day we met with social work to organize the different arrangements that have to happen after birth. I believe anywhere past 20 weeks or something, the baby would have to go to a funeral home and do sort of the things that a funeral home would do. So we had the choice of burial and cremation. We're looking at all these pamphlets being oh my God, you're supposed to have to figure this out for 90-year-olds, not babies. So they gave us a few different options and gave us all these pamphlets, gave us these phone numbers. And they were really helpful that it was once we decided where we wanted to go and what the plan was, they would do the rest. That was great, but it was still just I was just so run down and exhausted. I did not have the time to even begin to think about what sort of funeral home I want to be working with. We also had to sign some paperwork and get an understanding for the fact that at that gestation to deliver the baby, they would have to go to the coroner's office and there would have to be like a death certificate produced and all these things. And we're just like, oh my God, you don't need logistics at the same time as this. It felt like such an overwhelming day. But they were so great. There was one moment that we were at the hospital. It was a really long day, and someone came into the room and they were like, okay, so we're going to bring you over to whatever, this person next to talk to them. And I was just like, I can't. I'm done for the day. And it was like, no questions asked. That's fine. All good. We will book an appointment for you tomorrow when works for you. So they were just really lovely. They made it as pleasant as you could in a situation like that. We also had to go in for an appointment. Just myself, I went in. I had to get a COVID swab done because if you are at the time, if you were going in to deliver a baby, you either had to test negative for COVID or they would be like fully gowned up in the room. You'd be in a sterile isolation situation, which I just didn't want that. So I went in, I spoke to a very nice nurse. She did the COVID test. And then she asked me if I would like to see the birthing room. I thought about it and thought, you know what? I think seeing it today while I'm in this headspace would actually be beneficial. And it was. So she took me down the hallway and she showed me that at our hospital, they have a very secluded sort of hallway that's set up at the end, and it's quite far from all the other rooms, and these are their bereavement suites. They were beautiful rooms. They were very large. You are in that room from start to finish. There is no chance that they are putting you into a room with somebody else who has a live baby. It was just really nice to get a sense for, okay, this is the space we're going to be in. These are maybe the things that I would want to bring with me into the room. And I think it took away the sort of shock factor of the day, that it was just like, when it comes time for us to give birth, I'm going to know the space that I'm going into. There's not going to be a surprise here. Because had I not seen that, I don't know at that point if it had been explicitly mentioned to me that they had bereavement suites. And this nurse was very kind and she explained to me that people don't just walk in and out of these rooms willy-nilly. They put a butterfly on the door so that they know that that's the symbol that the mother in there or the family in there is going through a loss. They said there's a butterfly on your folder. And it just felt like, oh, this is not your first rodeo, which is tragic that this is not something that's rare as we would like to think that it is. But it was very comforting to know that would be the environment and to be able to see the environment and visualize the environment that I'd be giving birth in that week leading up to everything. We also had to pack all of our hospital gear, our hospital bag, which was stuff that I hadn't even begun to prepare. It was really an awful moment of getting your hospital bag ready, which it's like, if you Google, what should I pack in my hospital bag? Number one is like the cute outfit you want to put your baby in and take photos of. So it was really hard to find resources that weren't like that, but they're just really not out there because it's not the norm to not come home with your baby. So we packed the basics that we knew I would need for my body and my comfort, stuff for Taylor. We packed snacks, all those typical things. We also knew that this type of induction would be a long, sort of unpredictable process. So we brought like our iPads and our laptops and books. We brought Scrabble. We brought all these things that we just like absolutely didn't need. We probably, when we walked in, looked like we were going to try and stay for a week. But we were just like, you just had no idea. And honestly, I think part of the packing process was also a really good distraction for us in that week. So we maybe overdid it because it was just like something to do, something to keep us busy. I want to talk about coming up with a name. Now that we knew that we were having a boy, he had a name picked out. We already knew the name that we wanted for a boy. As soon as we found out it was a boy that we were having, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the name that we had picked in our head did not feel right for this baby and this baby's journey. But there was guilt associated to it, that it felt like I was saving that name for a living baby, that this name that we had picked out, this baby wasn't deserving of that name, but it wasn't that. And I was very confused with these feelings. So there was one evening that we were with my husband's family. Our cousin Laura, the midwife, she was there. And earlier in the first episode, I talked about how Laura was there for us in a way that we needed her to be. And had she been our midwife, we wouldn't have been able to have her as cousin Laura. So this is one of the examples. So we were sharing with them that, we have this name that we were so sure that if it was a boy, that was the name that we were going to use, but now it just doesn't feel right. She said to us, well, maybe that's because this baby has a unique story and this baby deserves a name that's unique to that. It was this like aha moment that she reframed how we were thinking of it, and that it wasn't that this baby didn't deserve a particular name. It's that this baby deserved their own name that was unique to this story. My husband and I had talked about the name Stanley. We had talked about this name very early on, even before we were married. I don't know what it was, if we saw a Stanley product somewhere, we drove by Stanley Street, or we were watching The Office and Stanley was saying something. I don't remember where it came from, but we were saying, oh my gosh, what a cute name Stanley is. Like, imagine a cute little baby named Stanley, and imagine a little kindergartner going to school and his name is Stanley. And we were like, that's the name. That's the name we're going to pick for a baby boy. As a few years went on, I started feeling like, well, if the name is Stanley, he gets to a certain age, people are going to start calling him Stan. And I just didn't like the name Stan. I pictured like boring accountant or something, or I like to say actuary because my brother-in-law is an actuary, a boring actuary in a beige office called Stan. And no shade to the accountants and actuaries out there, but I just don't like the name Stan. I don't know what it is. It just didn't feel right, but it was like, but little Stanley is so cute. So now fast forward a few years later, I've already vetoed the name Stanley. We're in this moment where now my cousin Laura has said, you're allowed to find a name that fits this baby boy, that he deserves, that is unique to him, that's special just for him. So I sat with that, and when we were home, just Taylor and I, and still at this point, nobody knew that we were having a boy. We did our best to keep that a secret. So we were home and we were talking about names, and I said, I think Stanley would be a really nice name for him. And Taylor says, well, I thought that you didn't want that name anymore. And I explained that, no, it's because I don't want him to be old and start being called Stan. And we said, he will always be baby Stanley, because sadly, he's not going to grow up. So he will just always be baby Stanley. And it just felt so right. It just felt like this name is so special for this baby boy. He is so deserving of this name. It was such a special name just for him. So we decided Stanley. We thought a little bit about what the middle name would be, and we knew that we would be giving him my husband's last name. I said, I kind of want the middle name to be something that's tied to my side of the family. So we opted to give him my last name as his middle name. So Stanley Frederick is his name. And it was perfect. It was the perfect name. Now we're nearing the end of the week. We are holding so much space for this baby and all of our feelings, all of the grief. We're still researching these heart defects to really confirm how we're feeling. We're coping with the gravity of the situation. We are having every emotion you could possibly have. And I won't get into it in this podcast, but I had a really challenging time getting the time off work that I needed. I was just so hysterical over some of the things that were happening discussion-wise between myself and HR. And it was just a realization of like, oh, I just like do not have the capacity to have these conversations and deal with these logistics. And anything that's like a micro trauma is massive. It is a massive like bawling and like screaming, crying. It was just the emotions were just so high. it was so fluid how we would go from one emotion to the next, where we're screaming and crying at something and then we're laughing about something the next moment and we're cuddling the belly at the next moment. And it was just how we were surviving. Now we're nearing the end of the week. We're coming up to Friday. We have already picked up the medication that I need to induce this delivery. And this is a medication that you have to take the day before your induction. This is when it really, really felt like shit got real. So we had that step 1 of the medication. We were sitting on that little day bed that we had set up in the living room. Taylor sat down beside me and we had just this moment of, okay, we're sure? Yeah, we're sure. And I took the pill. And we just settled in for the night. I might have had a glass of wine. I honestly can't remember. One of the nurses recommended it to me and she's like, well, you kind of morbid, but she's like, well, you're not going to do any harm. Have a glass of wine if that's what you need. And I was surviving off of Gravol to help me sleep. It's all survival. So whatever you can do to survive, that's what we were doing. We had been told that the day of the induction, so Friday, we would get called at some point with a bit of a heads up saying, here's your 30-minute warning, come to the hospital now. And they had no idea when that phone call would happen. It all depends on what other people are coming in to deliver, what's the staffing like in those moments. Of course, I wanted to be called in like first thing in the morning because we wanted to make sure that our MFM was the one who delivered. If I went past Friday and into Saturday, it wouldn't have been him anymore. I think he was only on until like 7 in the morning or something on Saturday. We really wanted to get the process going because I really, really wanted it to be him that delivered this baby. That Thursday night, it was really hard to bring ourselves to go to bed because everything just felt so finite. It felt like this is my last night carrying this baby. This is it. This is the last night. And that is a really hard feeling. We went to bed and we snuggled with my belly. We rubbed the belly. We talked to the belly. We cried with the belly. And we just tried to be there with our son that last night. By some grace, we managed to fall asleep and have okay sleeps. And we woke up very early in the morning. I think I was up and out of bed around 6. That was the longest that I could sleep for. I woke Taylor up in this whole week. I didn't really mention it, but I couldn't spend any time alone. I just did not want to be alone at any point in time. Alone was scary. Alone was a time that your emotions and your thoughts and everything could creep in. So I woke up. I maybe made myself a cup of tea and then went up and was like, okay, Taylor, you need to be up with me. And he was so wonderful, like no questions asked. He was as tired as ever, but he knew that I needed him. He was there with me. And we're sitting on the couch just with my cell phone in front of me being like, all right, I guess now we wait, with like no idea of when they're going to call us. I think we maybe had the TV on, but it was like you couldn't pay attention to anything. It was just all thoughts lead back to what's going on. And I will never forget just what that like pit in your stomach feels like, just waiting for a call that you simultaneously want and don't want. You're dreading it, but you're excited for it. So it was just after 9 in the morning. My phone starts ringing. No caller ID. I know that means it's the hospital. A very kind person says, hi, is this Kori? Yep. You're able to come in. We have a room ready for you. She said, you don't have to rush in. Make sure you eat something. She asked, what have you had today so far to eat? I said, I've had a banana. She said, you need to eat more than that because once you're here, we're not going to give you food. So it was a very typical conversation. Maybe ate like a croissant or something after that. It was like, my stomach was in knots. There was no way I was going to be able to eat anything. We texted our midwife and let her know that we had gotten the call and we were going to be headed on in. We grabbed our bags, we put everything into the car, and we drove. So I will leave it there for today. The next episode, we are going to get into the delivery. It's going to be an intense episode. And I mean, if I got emotional talking about finding out that we had a baby boy, I'm sure I'm going to get emotional going back into the delivery. I would say that the delivery is definitely the chapter of this story that I keep closed the most. So we're going to just ride the wave together as I tell this story. And I hope to see you back next week when we put out the next one, when we bring this baby boy into the world. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Please give this podcast a rating and a review. Please share this podcast with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And we'll see you next time.